Good morning to all. Today we're going to discuss the fraud risk assessment under the forensic accounting course unit. The fraud risk assessment. So at the end of the session, identify the importance of the IC internal controls, understanding the key roles of an internal audit, analyze fraud risk and factors that influence the fraud risk, evaluate different fraud risk. So as you know, there are three type of fraud schemes. Those are asset misappropriation, which is highly happening around the globe, and even your and my organization also it can be happen. And even though it has a high level of occurrence, the impact is low. The corruption, secondly, it's high, and thirdly, financial statement frauds are low, but the impact is high. So as you can see in the report issued by a report of the nation's certified fraud examiners institute, the fraud and fraud risk factors. Fraud means it is an intentional. If it is an unintentional, we call as error. So in auditing also you may learn that as per the SLA US 240. An intentional act by one or more individuals among management. One, if it is done by a group, we call as its collusion among management, those charged with governance, employees, or third parties involving the use of deception to obtain an unjust or the illegal advantage. This is illegal, punishable offense. As per the SLA US Sri Lanka Auditing Standard 240, the definition is there. The fraud risk factors. So you know that event or condition that indicate an incentive or the pressure to commit a fraud or provide opportunity to commit a fraud. As per the fraud triangle theory, you can identify there are three reasons people why commit to a fraud. The fraud risk, it is inherent fraud risk and residual fraud risk. Why should the organization concern about the fraud risk? Because it impact a huge cost and it will lead to collapse or the bankruptcy of the if that particular organization if the fraud is not monitored and evaluate, and the relevant punishes are given to the employees who are engaging with such kind of a fraudulent activity, right? So you can see how often do fraudsters commit more than one type of occasion fraud. That's what misappropriation high, corruption is secondly high, and financial statement is low, but the impact is very high. So asset misappropriation only 51% was encountered. Asset misappropriation both together can be happen. Sometimes these three can be happen together, right? Asset misappropriation and corruption 35%, and the corruption only 10%. Corruption, asset misappropriation, financial fraud, both three are to together it is 2%. Asset misappropriation and frauds 1%. No need to buy hard, right? But the global cost of fraud, because the as per the report issued by ACFE, you can see we have they are go ahead with 1,921 cases from 138 countries around the globe and territories, causing a total loss of more than dollars 3.1 billion. Right, average loss per case is 1,662,000. 22% of the cases had a loss with 1 million above dollar. Right here, loss per case, you can see Asia Pacific region wise, they are mentioning no need to buy hard. Factors that influence this can examinable. What are the factors which influence fraud risk? Why the fraud risk is occur due to these factors? Nature and business. If the business nature, if the businesses do not have proper internal control, segregation of the duties, lack of management oversight of the business, then of course there are a tendency that the frauds can happen. The operating environment, if it is highly regulated bankers, highly regulated by CBSL and FIU unit, because Financial Intelligence Unit, which is established under CBSL as a security purpose, operating environment, the effectiveness of the internal control, right? If the internal controls are very much poor, the CCTVs are there, but those are not working. The securities, the warehouse keeper stolen some inventories from the warehouse. That can be happen, right? The effectiveness, even though internal controls are there, no, it's not properly and if effectively and efficiently working. The ethics and values. If the employees have good ethics and values regarding their company and their morale is high, then of course the frauds is minimal because the good education, the fraud education, the forensic accounting knowledge is there. So if I rush through the fraud triangle theory, first year onwards, if I'm not mistaken, you are learning that because this is like a triangle. If I draw like this for triangle theory, there are three factors, right? There is a pressure. Pressure we call as a motivation. Pressure or the motivation, because let's say you have some financial obligations. You don't have money to pay on time, the credit card installment, and you are owing some money to other employees, and you are taking a bank loan. You want to pay the installments like capital payments plus the interest on due date. Otherwise, you are charging a penalty, or otherwise you are going to crib report. Crib pressure is there. And meantime, you have the rationalize. You are rationalizing. I'm just now borrowing. Let's say you are petty cash. You are handling. You are stealing 5,000 per week, and for entire month 20,000. You are, once you receive salary, you are filtering, or you are reimbursing that. That is rationalizing. I'm just taking a loan. Later on, I will reimburse that. Rationalizing. You are rationalizing your work, fraud work, right? An opportunity. If there is a lack of internal controls, no proper segregation of duties, SODs, you can identify those as the fraud triangle theory, right? Fraud triangle. But when it comes to the fraud diamond theory, there is a one more additional one. There is a one more additional one. When we go through with the diamond theory, so you can see there is a motivation. Motivation as discussed in previous slides also, because financial pressure, monetary gain, achievement, manipulation. You are manipulating the financial statement, and you are overstating some expenses, and you are gain that money, right? Opportunity, environment factors, victim characteristic, and rationalization believe that violating rules are acceptable. Even senior management also committing frauds. Why I can't? I also engage in that kind of frauds, right? Capability, knowing about the corporate governance. When let's say employees are working more than 10 years, let's say 5 years, you know what are the loopholes which is pertaining to an environment. What are the, let's say, for example, I'm saying this practical. Let's say a company called A, their payment process, right? No one is overseeing, and who can submit. Sometimes who can submit by putting the, let's say, uh, selling co life insurance private limited, the payment is goes to there, but name is there, but the one who is entering, who is making the payment, entering his bank accounts, Bank of Ceylon, uh, Vellavatta branch, his account number, but name is legitimate name. It's like that, right? Technical knowledge to steal victim, software manipulation to others. It has a power, right? Fraud risk assessment. Fraud risk assessment is a process. The name itself, it's given a process. Assessment in the sense it's a process, right? Aim to proactively identify. It's not a reactive, it's proactive. In previously, before the fraud is happened, it is able to identify and correct it, right? Proactively identifying and addressing an organization's vulnerabilities. The risk is both internal and external fraud. Sometimes employees itself engage in most of the cases, the employee internal environment also suspect to frauds. External, it can be happen like suppliers, they are providing cheap materials, charging a high price. It also a type of fraud. Likewise, and a fraud risk assessment start with an identification and prioritization of the fraud risk that exists in the business. The process involves as a result of that identification and prioritization begin to drive education, communication, organizational alignment, and actions, whatever the effectively managing fraud risk and identifying new fraud risk as they emerge. What are the objectives in order to mitigate? Even you can think and write. What are the objectives in order to identify what are the loopholes, what are the inefficiencies which is pertaining to environment and which is lead to frauds happening, right? The objective of the fraud risk assessment to help an organization to recognize what makes most vulnerable to fraud, what are the loopholes, what are the inefficiencies which is in the environment, organization environment, right? So the through a fraud risk assessment, the organization is able to identify where fraud is most likely to occur, whether in the payment process, whether in the procurement process, enabling proactive measures to be considered and implemented to reduce the chance that it could happen, right? The strategic reasoning used in conducting fraud assessment requires a skeptical mindset, professional skepticism, you in the auditing or the always questioning mind, and involves asking questions such as how might a fraud preparator exploit weakness in the system? How could a preparator override the circumvent controls? what control a perpetrator do to conceal the fraud? What are the mechanisms he is going to conceal the fraud? Those are need to be there. Why should organizations conduct a fraud risk assessment? To improve communication and awareness about fraud. You need to improve the communication and awareness about the fraud. A fraud risk assessment can be create vehicle or the it's a vehicle and it's a weapon for an organization to open up the communication and raise awareness about the fraud. If the people who are knowing the proper fraud education, they are not engaging with such kind of a fraudulent activities because they know that the fraud activities encountered in later. When employees are when employees are engaged in an open discussion about fraud, the conversation themselves can play a role in reducing fraud vulnerabilities. Identify what activities are most vulnerable to fraud. Managers must know where the company is most vulnerable to fraud in order to prevent it. For most companies, the normal course of business generally involves many different activities. However, not all the activities in which the company engage are equal in terms of increasing business exposure to fraud. The fraud risk assessment helps guide the organization to focus on the activities that put the company greatest risk. Develop plans to mitigate fraud risk. In order to reduce the fraud risk, if management knows where the greatest fraud risk arise, it can put plans to place in reduce or mitigate or avoid such kind of a fraud risk. The results of the fraud risk assessment can be used to gain alignment among various stakeholders to drive a preventive action. Assess internal controls. Many organizations have heavily on their internal control system to prevent and detect fraud. Although internal controls play a critical role in the fraud prevention and detection, it is a dynamic system that requires constant re-evaluation of its weaknesses. Performing a fraud risk assessment provides management with the opportunity to review the company's internal control system for effectiveness. Comply with regulation and professional standard. Fraud risk assessment can assist management and auditors, both internal and external auditors, in satisfying regulatory requirements and complying with professional standards pertaining to their responsibility for fraud risk management. Factors leading to good fraud risk assessment. What are the factors? It can be tested, right? The right sponsor, collaborative for management and the auditors, right? What are the factors leading to good fraud risk assessment? In order to have good fraud risk assessment, what are the factors, right? Engage, trust, a good working knowledge of the access to people, all levels, because there are no restrictions, independence, objectivity of the people leading, conduct the work, the right sponsorship, the ability to think the unthinkable, there is a ability to engage, trust. So you can see a plan to keep it live and relevant. So I'm not going to waste our time for here. You can even fraud risk assessment process identifying potential inherent fraud risk. Firstly, you need to identify what are the fraud risks which is pertinent to the entity and specific to the entity environment by analyzing their internal control. What are the most acceptable things? Assess the likelihood of occurrence. Likelihood is the probability of occurrence. Assess the identified fraud is significant. What are the significant? Where did it generate? Let's say as a piece of you identify because people who are engaging like photocopies sometimes using office vehicles for their person that also fraud as per the fraud schemes, but the impact is very low. So the identified fraud is significant. If you try to control your employees the usage of the office vehicle, you want to hire a security guard to monitor. You need to pay for 50,000 per month, but the actual cost of that visa proposition is 20,000 per month. Then there is a net negative benefit, right? Benefits over than the cost. Sorry, cost is over than the benefit, right? Evaluate which people are department most likely to commit a fraud, identify and map existing and prevent it because TARA framework, the risk management, you know that TARA framework we have transfer, avoid, reduce, and accept. Evaluate whether the identified controls are operating effectively, the operation internal controls are operating effectively, identify and evaluate the residual fraud risk which cannot be eliminated. So here you can see this likelihood in the sense it's probability, right? Probability into the cost. Dot heat map. Here you can see heat map because here is if we go to this side, the significance is high. Here high significance, here low significance, low. Here likelihood also low in high. So if in the case of the data disruption, the Likelihood is low. The significance is also low because data backups are there in the computer system. Low. Losing major customers. Likelihood is somewhat high and significance also high. With the embezzlement means misappropriating the company asset for the personal usage. That is an umbrella term. Likelihood is moderate and significance also can be moderate as well. Okay. So the Tara framework, avoid, transfer, mitigate, and assume, or the accept. Assume in the sense it's accepting. Okay. I think it's clear for you all. In corporate finance also you may learn this. Later on you can read those stuff. And I'm not going to read it one by one. Okay. Okay, now if we go to the last year paper, I think it's visible to you because we are already discussed yesterday the question number 3, it from PML, prevention of money laundering, 4 from digital forensics, and 5 is investigation. So later you can recognize what are the examinable points, and now we are going to discuss the question number 2. Okay, thank you.